Jai Hind, dear children. Last class we studied about economics chapter, globalization and the Indian economy. In this chapter we already completed topics like meaning of the term globalization and the importance of globalization on Indian economy. Then we studied how markets have been transformed in the recent years. What are the reasons why we are having that much of change in the markets? Then we studied about MNC, multinational corporations or multinational companies, and the criteria used by these MNCs to select a country to start their companies, and also about the working process of MNC that we studied in detail. Then we studied about the ways. That means these MNCs, they are adopting 3 ways to interlink their production process with other countries to gain profit. And we studied with the help of 3 examples. We studied the 3 ways, like the examples of Ford Motors, Cargill Foods, and about garments and footwear makings, all that. Then we studied about foreign trade and how integration of markets took place. And also we studied how foreign trade help in the integration of markets in different countries, with the example of Chinese toys, with a comparison between Chinese toys and Indian toys. Then we studied what is globalization, its main advantages, and how MNC, that means multinational companies, play an important role in the globalization process. So today we are going to study another topic related to this chapter, which is very important to know in detail about this globalization process. The next topic we want to study related to this chapter is the factors that have enabled globalization. So in this topic, there are 2 main factors that enable globalization process to work properly. They are technology and liberalization. So first of all, we want to study in detail how technology help in the development of globalization process. And in technology also, we are having 2 examples to understand in detail how it helped to have a rapid growth in the development process. The first development that took place in technology as a part of this globalization process is improvement in transportation technology. Here we are having an example to know whatever improvement we are having in the transportation technology, that is the use of containers. So goods are replaced in containers that can be loaded intact into ships, railways, planes and trucks. So before this use of these containers, it is very difficult in the early years to just transport these goods and services from one area to another area, because we are making use of some other means of ways for transporting these goods and services, and we can't transport a bulk of goods at a time, because it's very difficult also. So all these problems can be easily overcome with the use of these containers. So with the help of the containers, these goods can be loaded intact into ships, railways, planes and trucks. Containers have led to a huge reduction in port handling cost and increased the speed with which export can reach markets very easily. Similarly, the cost of air transport has fallen as a part of this coming of these containers, or the use of these containers. This has enabled much greater volume of goods being transported by airlines. So one of the main merit of these containers is that at a time we can transport huge quantities of goods. That is, as a result of that, we can earn a lot of profit through this transportation and all other facilities, and at the same time we can sell these products very easily in the markets whatever we produced at a time. So these containers manufacturing has made faster delivery of good across long distance at a lower cost. That is a main advantage we are getting in the transportation technology as a part of this globalization process. So, as a part of these factors that enable the globalization process, The first one, technology. The second example of this technology is improvement in information and communication technology. This information and communication technology, that means IT, has played a major role in spreading out production of services across countries. There have been rapid developments in the information and communication technology. For example, telecommunications, computers, internet, etc. They have made easy access to any person or place around the world. For example, telecommunication facilities are used to contact one another around the world, to access information instantly and to communicate from remote areas. So once again, the telecommunication facilities are used to contact one another around the world, to access information instantly and to communicate from remote areas. Next, computers. Computers have entered almost every field of activities. From internet, we can obtain and share information and on almost anything that we want to know. It allows us to send instant electronic mails, that is email, and talk, that means voicemail, across the world at negligible cost. So these computers that have entered almost every field of our activities, isn't it? We can see everywhere this computer transactions is going on in recent time. From internet, we can obtain and share informations on almost anything that we want to know. It allows us to send instant electronic mails, emails, and talk, that is voicemail, across the world at negligible cost. So about this informations of this IT, that means information communication technology, or how it help in the globalization process, how it help to just carry on the business process in the proper way, that we can understand very helpful with the help of an example. Information and communication technology has played a major role in spreading out production of services across countries, that we just going to study with the help of an example. A news magazine published for London readers is to be designed and printed in Delhi. How this happened? The text of the magazine is sent through internet to the Delhi office from London. The designers in the Delhi office get orders on how to design the magazine from the office in London using telecommunication facilities. The designing is done on a computer. After printing, the magazines are sent by air to London. Even the payment of money for designing and printing from a bank in London to a bank in Delhi is done instantly through which process? Through the internet, that is through e-banking system. So everything is carried on very smoothly through this IT, that means information technology, or through the technological process. So from this we can understand that it is very easily carry on a business between two countries with the help of this improvement in our information and communication technology. So this example gives us a clear idea how London and Delhi carry on this business very smoothly without the movement of persons from one country to another country, isn't it? So all these examples gives us a very good idea how information and communication technology help in the production process or development of goods and services very smoothly. So the second factor that enable to just have the globalization process in the smooth way is the liberalization process. So here first we want to understand, or we want to know, what is the meaning of this term liberalization and how it is having an important role in the globalization process. So what is the meaning of this term liberalization? What is liberalization? Removing barriers or restrictions set by the government is what is known as a liberalization. With liberalization of trade, business are allowed to make decisions freely about what they wish to import or export. So once again, what is liberalization? Removing barriers or restrictions set by the government is what is known as a liberalization. So from this term meaning itself, we are going to understand or study another new term, which is that a barrier, isn't it? A trade barrier is there, because liberalization means we are removing that barriers. So that means before this liberalization process adopted by our Indian government, there is some barriers in our country, isn't it? Some trade barriers are there, some restrictions are there in our country. So now we are going to study in detail why our government imposed these barriers in India and what is the main aim of having these barriers in India in the early period, and why now our government in 1990s why they adopted this new policy of liberalization, that we are going to study in detail in this topic. First, we want to understand the meaning of the term trade barriers. What is a trade barrier? Trade barriers refers to the laws, institutions or practices which make trade between countries more difficult or expensive than trade within countries. So once again, what is meant by a trade barrier? It refers to the law, institutions or practices which make trade between countries more difficult or expensive than trade within countries. So in short, we can say that when there is some barriers in trade, we can call it as trade barriers. So now we want to know why our Indian government soon after independence adopted this trade barriers on foreign trade and foreign investment. So our Indian government is of the opinion that there were various reasons why they impose this trade barriers, or why they adopt this trade barriers on foreign trade and foreign investment. The first reason, they are saying that in order to protect the producers within the country from foreign competition, our government imposed these trade barriers. So what is the condition of the producers or the industries in India during the time of independence? In India, we are having only small scale industries, and it is very difficult for these small scale producers to compete with the foreign goods, and they are not able to compete well with these foreign goods also. So in order to protect these small scale industries or our own country, so in order to help the small scale industries of our own country from these foreign competitors, and in order to help them to just raise their position as large scale industries, or to develop themselves as large scale industries, what our government do? The only way the government adopt is to start these trade barriers to protect the producers, because industries were just coming up in the 1950s and 1960s, and the competition from imports at that stage would not have allowed these industries to come up, isn't it? So thus India decided to have these trade barriers. Second one, to increase or decrease foreign trade, and that means to have a regulate in this foreign trade. So in order to regulate the foreign trade in the proper way, our Indian government adopt this trade barriers. And the third one is to decide what kind of goods and how much of each should come into our country, isn't it? Because in order to have a control about the imports and exports of goods that coming to our country, that we are just selling from our country also, we want to have a complete idea about that. So in order to have that also, our government decided to have these trade barriers. Thus India, as a result of this, India allowed imports of only essential items such as machinery, fertilizers, petroleum. Only these items can be imported to India. Now, note that all developed countries during the early stages of development have given protection to domestic producers through a variety of means. So, all around the world, all the developing countries and developed countries, what they do, they also give this a lot of importance in the early stages to their domestic producers, that means producers within their country, to develop at their best. That our India is also done in the during the independent period by adopting these trade barriers. But what happened is that during the time of 1990, that means that during the years of 1990, 1991, our government came to understand that it is a time to take off these trade barriers and to adopt another policy. Which is that policy? It is known as the liberalization policy, removing these barriers or restrictions set by the government in trade. It is known as liberalization. And if we are making liberal in our trade policies, industries are allowed to make decisions freely about what they wish to import or export. So the government of India decided that the time had come for Indian producers to compete with producers around the globe, because in this period, that means during 1990s, 1991, our Indian domestic producers were capable of competing with the foreign producers. It felt that competition would improve the performance of producers within the country, since they would have to improve their quality, isn't it? Why our government decided to have this liberalization policy? If the liberalization policy came to our country, then what will happen? We, the Indians, we will just have a good idea, or we will have a place to just have our competitions with other foreign countries, and we can just would improve the performance of the producers within the country, since they have to improve their quality also. We can compete with other countries and we can improve our quality also as a result of this. The decision to remove trade barriers was supported by powerful international organizations like IMF and WTO. These are UNO organizations. This IMF and WTO, they also heartily welcomed our decision to take off these trade barriers and to adopt a new policy of liberalization. Goods could now be imported and exported easily, and also foreign companies could set up factories and offices here, isn't it? So, as a result of this liberalization, all the countries, they can import goods and export. These importing and exporting can be easily carry on in our country, and also foreign countries could set up their factories and offices here. So all these happen as a result of this taking off these trade barriers and adopting liberalization policy in our country. Next, we want to study how this liberalization process help in the smooth functioning of globalization in different parts of the world. So in India, how this liberalization and globalization go hand in hand? How? With liberalization of trade, industries are allowed to make decisions freely, isn't it, about what they wish to import and export. So as a result of this freeness in these industries, they are free to do any type of business and to earn profit. And it also leads to the overall development of that country. Goods are now being imported and exported easily. And as a result of this, as a producer, our products are selling all around the world, and we are having competitions with the other countries, and it help us to increase or develop our quality also. At the same time, as a consumer, we are getting a lot of varieties at low prices also in our country itself. Then companies can set up factories and offices in other countries. For example, the Tata Motors, Infosys, etc. Isn't it? As a result of this, when this liberalization, globalization go hand in hand, what happened? Many MNCs, they can set up factories and offices in other countries also, like the Tata Motors or Infosys, like that. Then activities of many MNC have increased foreign investment and foreign trade, which has led to greater integration of productions and markets across countries and thereby globalization process. So once again, activities of many MNCs have increased foreign investment and foreign trade, which had led to greater integration of production and markets across countries and thereby developing the globalization process. At the same time, domestic countries are free to compete with producers around the globe. So, when this liberalization process started by our Indian government or adopted by our Indian government, and when they mingled with this globalization process, it brought about a tremendous change, not only in India but all around the world. In different countries, they are having a total development in all spheres of their life. Next topic we want to study related to this chapter is the World Trade Organizations. That means the importance of the international organizations and how they help this liberalization, globalization process, and what is the importance of these international organizations in the trade process throughout the world. So, liberalization of foreign trade and investment in India was supported by some very powerful international organizations that we already studied, like IMF and WTO, isn't it? These organizations say that all barriers to foreign trade and investment are harmful. It creates many problems to the country and to the trade process also. There should be no barriers in the country. Then only trade between countries should be free. All countries in the world should liberalize their policies. Then only the trade programs and the trade developments will be in 100%, and it led to the overall development of our countries also in the world. So it is of the opinion of the international organizations, especially like IMF and WTO, is they are asking those countries, those who have adopted trade barriers, to liberalize their trade barriers, to have a freeness in the export and import process in trade. Among the international organizations, we want to study in detail about the WTO. That means World Trade Organization. So the main aim to form this organization by our UNO is to liberalize international trade. It was because of that reason itself we want to study in detail about this WTO. What is WTO? It is one of the main international organization whose aim is to liberalize international trade. So what is the main aim of WTO? What is WTO? It is an international organization whose aim is to liberalize international trade. WTO establishes rules regarding international trade and sees that these rules are obeyed, isn't it? So, what is the duty of this WTO? Its main duty is to establish rules regarding international trade and sees that these rules are obeyed by all the countries, mainly those countries, those who are members of this WTO. Nearly 160 countries of the world are currently members of WTO as per 2014 report. So, nearly how many countries? 160 countries were the members of WTO as per 2014 report. Then, it deals with regulation of trade between participating countries. That means member countries. So, it deals with regulation of trade between its member countries. It oversees the implementation, administration and operation of the covered agreements. So, the WTO, it oversees, that means it regulates or it just have a check on the implementation, administration, operation of the covered agreements. It is supposed to allow free trade for all. That means the WTO, its main objective or its main aim is to allow free trade for all. It provides a forum for negotiation and for settling disputes. The WTO, it also acts as a forum for the negotiation and settling disputes between its participating countries or its member countries. It is also a center of economic research and analysis. This WTO, it's also a center for economic research and analysis. So once again, WTO, World Trade Organization, is one of the important international organization whose aim is to liberalize international trade. WTO establishes rules regarding international trade and sees that these rules are obeyed by each and every member countries. Nearly 160 members or 160 countries of the world are currently members of the WTO as per 2014 report. Then it also deals with the regulations of trade between its member countries, and it oversees the implementation, administration and operation of the covered agreements between its members. Its main aim is to allow free trade for all, and it provides a forum for negotiation and for settling disputes. It is also a center of economic research and analysis. Then, the WTO is supposed to allow free trade for all. But in practice, what happened? All these are going on well as a part of our trade process. It is found that the developed countries have unfairly retained trade barriers. Developed countries, they are having unretained trade barriers. That is a thing which is going on in our world. On the other hand, WTO rules have forced the developing countries to remove trade barriers. So, the WTO, they just form this organization, or their main aim is to liberalize international trade, and they put forward many rules and regulations to liberalize it also, and they ask all their member countries to make their trade policies free. That means if they are having any trade barriers, just remove the trade barriers. That is the main objective of aim of this WTO. But what happens is that in reality, if we are checking the developed countries, that means the members, among the members of the WTO, the developed countries have unfairly retained trade barriers, and this WTO, they force their undeveloping members, that means their members who are undeveloped, who are developing countries, not undeveloped, who are developing countries, to remove trade barriers. They are forcing them to remove trade barriers. And here we are having an example which may make us to understand this very easily, that this WTO, they are having two ideas regarding these terms and conditions towards these developed countries and developing countries, that we are understanding very well with the help of an example. So now we are going to study that example also to understand how these rules and regulations of WTO carry on between these developed countries and developing countries. So we can understand well the rules and regulations and how it is come into practice among the developed and developing countries with the help of an example. That is a debate on trade practice. It is there in your textbook itself. Because first we are just having an example of India as a developing country and USA as a developed country. So in India, it is agriculture sector that provides the bulk of employment and a significant portion of the GDP, isn't it? In India, our agriculture sector is considered as a backbone of our economy. So we are giving it that much of importance to this agriculture sector in India, and it is providing a lot to our GDP also. That means gross domestic product. When we are comparing this with a developed country, that is USA, with the share of agriculture in GDP, its share is only 1%, and its share in total employment is a tiny of 0.5%. And yet, what happened? A small percentage, a very small percentage of people in USA is engaged in agriculture activities. But as US is a developed country, what happened? These small number of agricultures or the farmers, they are receiving massive sums of money from the US government for production and for exports to other countries. In every area they are helping their government. Due to this massive money from that they receive, the US farmers can sell the farm products at abnormally low prices in other countries. And the surplus farm products are sold in other country markets at low prices, adversely affecting the farmers in these countries. Because if US is selling their products in India, what happened? In India we are developing country, and we are removing our trade barriers also, isn't it? So every country they are selling their products in India, and in India also we are developing, we are not developed. So our government can't help just like the US government. Therefore, how the farmers in US were helped by their government. In that way, our government can't help us because we are a developing country, and our government is having a lot of limitations in economic area also. So what happened? Because of these limitations and these problems, these developed countries, they sell their products in the developing countries, and they earn a lot of profit as a result of that. And the developing countries, they have to face a lot of problems as a result of all this. And the developing countries are therefore asking the developed country government, we have reduced trade barriers as per WTO, isn't it? WTO rules. Then why you, just like a developed country, and why you are ignoring these rules? Can't you just carry on a free and fair trade policies? But that is not happening in the world in recent years also. So these international organizations, they are helping, especially this WTO, World Trade Organization, they are helping a lot to implement many new policies and to just carry on the trade in a free and fair manner. But what happened is that these are their policies and their aims and objectives are helping a lot the developed countries. At the same time, the developing countries, they are getting a little benefit from all this, and they want to suffer a lot as a result of all this. So everyone want to take it very seriously and to overcome all these problems faced by the poor farmers, traders and businessmen in the developing countries. Next topic we want to study related to this chapter is the impact of globalization in India. What is the impact of globalization in India on the Indian economy? Through this chapter, we are going to have an overall study about the globalization process. That means it includes both the advantages and disadvantages of globalization, all the merits and demerits of globalization, all the negative and positive impact of globalization in India. So first we are going to study in detail about the positive impact about globalization. What are the positive impacts we are having as a result of this globalization process in our Indian economy? In the last 20 years, globalization of the Indian economy has come a long way. That means globalization brought about tremendous changes and also creates many advantages in the life of consumers, producers and to many large companies in India that we are going to study in detail. So first of all, we are going to study in the positive aspect of this globalization in Indian economy, all the merits of this globalization, all the advantages of this globalization. Then first we want to know about how this MNC take part in this globalization process. MNC means the multinational companies. So the multinational companies, MNCs, have increased their investments over the past 25 years. They have been interested in industries such as cell phones, automobiles, etc. So the MNCs, they increased their investment over the last 25 years. In these industries and services, new jobs have been created. And also local companies supplying raw materials, etc. to these industries have prospered. So as a result of this globalization, these MNCs, they invested huge in our country for the last 25 years. And as a result of these, the industries and services, they created new jobs, and those industries that are supplying raw materials to these MNCs, they also prospered. That means they also developed a lot as a result of these globalization process with the help of MNC. And several of the top companies have been able to benefit from the increased competition. And many top companies in India, they also have a lot of benefits, increased benefits as a result of these competitions. Then several of the top Indian companies have been able to benefit from this increased competitions. They have invested in the newer technology and production methods and raised their production standards. So as a result of these economic benefit from this, with the help of this globalization and MNC, what our Indian top companies do, they invested in other new technologies and production methods and raised their production standard as a result of that. Moreover, globalization have been creating new opportunities for companies providing services, particularly those involving information technology. So the globalization, they are helping many companies. At the same time, they are giving a lot of help to which area? To the information technology by providing their services and many other helps. So these are the main benefits created in our country as a result of this globalization process and with the help of these MNCs. Now we are going to study in detail each one of these. That means how this globalization is beneficial to the consumers, to the producers, and to the large Indian companies. Now we want to study how the globalization is beneficial to a consumer. So first of all, who is a consumer? A person who purchases goods and services from the marketplace is called a consumer. So who is a consumer? A person who purchases goods and services from the marketplace is called a consumer. So how this globalization is beneficial to the consumer, or it creates some positive effects to the consumer. This globalization creates great competition among producers that have been of advantage to consumers, particularly the well-off section in the urban areas, because they get greater choice before these consumers. They enjoy improved quality and lower prices for several products. Today, these people enjoy much higher standard of living than was possible earlier. So this was the main positive effect created to the consumers by this globalization. So once again, globalization created greater competition among producers that have been of great advantage to consumers, particularly the well-off section in the urban areas, because in the early years they are not having that much of choice in low prices, but just now they are having greater choice before these consumers. They now enjoy improved quality at lower price for several products. So today what happened? These consumers enjoy much higher standard of living than was possible earlier. Undoubtedly, globalization had greater competition among producers also, both local and foreign producers. That had been a great advantage to consumers because they are getting greater choice at good quality and lower prices, and it increased their standard of living also. So as a result of this, what happened is that these MNCs are able to find the cheapest goods in order to maximize their profits, because these MNCs are the producers. They are just able to find the cheapest goods but best quality goods to maximize their profit. Globalization also enabled some companies to emerge as MNCs themselves, and this globalization also created new opportunities for companies providing services particularly related to information and communication technology. So to the producers also, this globalization process is giving a lot of positive benefits. Globalization also created positive advantages to many top Indian companies because many top Indian companies they were able to benefit a lot. That means increased competitions and this helped these top Indian companies to earn a lot of profit as a result of this, and they started to invest this in the newer technology and production methods and raise their production standard. As a result of all this, the globalization has enabled some large Indian companies to emerge as multinational themselves. That means this globalization process helped many top Indian companies to emerge as MNCs. For example, Tata Motors, it is an automobile industry. Then next one is Infosys. This Infosys, it is a IT industry, that is information technology industry. Then the third one is Ranbaxy. It is a medicines industry. That means this Ranbaxy, they are preparing medicines. Next is Asian Paints. They are producing paints. And next is the Sundaram Fasteners. They are producing nuts and bolt. So these are some of the Indian companies which are spreading their operations worldwide, which are the top Indian companies as a result of these globalization process. These are some examples of those companies which developed as MNCs or multinational companies. As a result of all these positive aspects or advantages of globalization, our Indian government, both the central government and state governments, they decided to adopt a new law or idea or policy in India. It is known as SEZ. S-E-Z, SEZ. What is the meaning of or expansion of this SEZ? Special Economic Zones. So, our government decided to start up these SEZ, S-E-Z, Special Economic Zones. What is the importance of this SEZ or Special Economic Zones? The Special Economic Zones are the industrial zones that are being set up by the central and state government to attract foreign companies to invest in India because of their positive advantages. So once again, what is the main objective of starting or adopting this SEZ? So the SEZ or the Special Economic Zones are the industrial zones that are being set up by the central and state government to attract foreign companies to invest in India. SEZ or Special Economic Zones where world-class facilities like water, electricity, roads, transport, recreation, education are available. They aim to attract foreign companies to invest in India. So the benefits of this SEZ, what all benefits the government is providing? They are providing world-class facilities like good water facilities, better electric facilities, good roads, transportation, recreation, education, everything available. Because their main aim is to attract foreign companies to invest in India. They have been set up by our government to attract foreign companies only to invest in India. That is the main objective of this SEZ. Companies with production units in the SEZ do not have to pay taxes for the initial period of 5 years. That is also another benefit given by our government to these foreign companies, which is that the companies with production units in this SEZ, those companies, those started production units in this SEZ areas, do not have to pay taxes for the initial period of 5 years. Government has also allowed flexibility in the labor laws to attract foreign investment. So, our government, they also allowed flexibility in the labor laws to attract foreign investment. Then, instead of hiring workers on a regular basis, companies may hire workers flexible for short period when there is intense pressure of work. This is to reduce the cost of labor for the company. And another benefit which the company is having is that instead of hiring workers on a regular basis, company may hire workers flexibly for a short period when there is intense pressure of work. This is done to reduce the cost of labor for the company. And the government removed barriers on foreign trade and foreign investment so that goods could be imported and exported easily, and also foreign companies could set up factories and offices here. So our Indian government also give another benefit, which is that they remove barriers on foreign trade and foreign investments so that goods could be imported and exported easily, and also foreign companies could set up factories and offices here. So, only to attract foreign companies, that means many MNCs, to come to our country and to start their new projects in our country, only to have an economic development. As a result of that, our government started this new idea, that is SEZ, or Special Economic Zones. Next, we are going to study about the negative impacts of globalization in our Indian economy. Along with the positive impacts, there are many negative impacts or disadvantages or demerits of this globalization along with MNC. MNCs are exerting a strong influence on production, posing a great threat for our domestic industries. So, as these MNCs are exerting a strong influence on the production process, what happens is that it create many threat and many problems to the domestic industries. That means those industries, those who are there in our country, it creates many problems to them. While job prospects have increased, wages are low, and workers are forced to work overtime to make both ends meet. So, with the coming of these MNCs, job opportunities increased a lot, but wages become very low, and workers are forced to work overtime to make both ends meet. In order to meet all the expenses, they want to do overtime work also, these workers. For a large number of small producers and workers, globalization has posed major challenges. Globalization has not been fair for all, isn't it? So, for a large number of small producers and for the workers, this globalization creating a lot of problems because it is not fair for all. Then, because the large MNCs have tremendous power to determine the price, quality, delivery, and labor condition for the small producers of other countries. Because as the MNCs are very powerful, they are having tremendous power to control and determine the price, quality, delivery, and labor condition for the small producers in those countries where they are starting their companies. So they have posed major challenges for a large number of small producers in those countries where they start their new companies. For example, the batteries, capacitors, plastics, toys, dairy products, and vegetable oils are some of the main industries where the small manufacturers had been hit hard due to competitions. So, which were the small industries which were hit hard very much, which were facing a lot of problems as a result of this globalization process, which were those small industries or small companies. It were batteries, capacitors making companies, plastics making companies, then toy makings, dairy products making, and vegetable oils. These are some of the small industries which are facing a lot of problems as a result of this globalization. And because of these competitions, they are not able to compete with the foreign market. Several of the units have shut down, rendering many farm workers jobless. And many of these small industries, they shut down and leads to the workers jobless also. So, these globalization creating a lot of problems mainly to the workers and the small producers and to the average section of the society. At the same time, the impact of globalization on Indian agriculture has not been positive. In that area also, in the agriculture field also, this globalization creating a lot of problems. The agriculture sector in India has been badly affected by the globalization. Indian agriculture had been hit hard due to the foreign competitions because our Indian agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy. It had been hit hard by the foreign competitions. So these are some of the common negative impacts of globalization in our Indian economy. And we already studied that this globalization creates some negative impacts to the workers in the factories and to the small producers. So with the help of some examples, we are just going to study in detail what were the problems faced by the small producers and the workers in India as a result of this globalization process. Now we are going to study the negative impact of this globalization on small producers, especially small companies. So small scale producers had to face competitions due to globalization. Small producers could not keep their cost of production low and hence lost market. They could not sell their commodities at competitive price and had to lessen production. Batteries, capacitors, plastic, toys, tires, dairy products, and vegetable oil are some examples of industries where the small manufacturers had been hit hard due to competition. Several of the units have shut down, rendering many workers jobless. That it's very clear to you with an example in your textbook itself. That is an example of Ravi. Ravi did not expect that he would have to face a crisis in such a short period of his life as an industrialist, because he started in 1992 a small company producing capacitors in Huzur in Tamil Nadu. And he was able to expand production and had 20 workers working under him. But he started facing problems when the government removed restrictions on imports of capacitors as per the agreement at WTO in 2001. His main clients were television companies who used to buy different components including capacitors in bulk for the manufacture of television sets. But what happened is that when these foreign companies they began to have these capacitors at low cost and varieties to our country, what happened? These television clients they began to use that capacitors rather than Ravi's. So Ravi now produces less than half of the capacitors that he produced in the year 2000 and has only 7 workers working for him. There are many small producers like Ravi who had closed their units because of the demerits of these globalization process. So this was a condition of the small producers as a result of this globalization and the coming of the MNCs to India. So just like the small producers of companies, the workers also face a lot of negative impact as a result of this globalization. So now we are going to study what were the problems faced by the workers as a result of this globalization. So as a result of closure of many small scale industries, many workers lost their jobs. They now work on temporary wages or temporary basis and their jobs are no longer secure. They had to put in very long working hours. Their wages are low and they are denied their fair share of benefits. So what was the condition of these workers? As a small scale industries has been closed, many workers lost their job. They now work on temporary basis, but in earlier they were permanent workers, but now they are working on temporary basis and their jobs are no longer secure. They had to put in very long working hours. The wages are low and they are denied for fair share of benefits, and they paid insufficient and low wages also, and they have to work night shifts on a regular basis during the peak seasons. So as a result of this globalization, the workers they had to face, especially the garment industry, that type of factory workers, they have to face a lot of problems, and they have to do long hours of work and they are having only very low wages. And in your textbook itself, there is an example of Sushila. She also facing the same problem because for 35 years she was working in a garment industry in Delhi, but as a permanent worker. But as her factory closed in 1990, she was searching for a job for 6 months. After that, she got a job, but it was only a temporary basis and wages very low, and she was not having any benefits from that. That was a condition of most of the workers in our country as a result of the negative impact of this globalization. Next topic we want to study in this chapter is the struggle for a fair globalization. Why we want a fair globalization? Because from all these evidences it is indicated that not everyone has benefited in the same way from globalization. People with education, skill and wealth have made the best use of the new opportunities. On the other hand, there are many people who have not shared the benefits. So, this fair globalization would create opportunities for all and also ensure that the benefits of globalization are shared better. So, because of that reason, our government decided to adopt many steps to have this fair globalization. So, the fair globalization, there is an urgent need to make globalization fair because globalization has benefited only well-off consumers and also producers with a skill, education and wealth. This has failed to eliminate poverty and bring economic equality because our government thought that by adopting liberalization policy and by having this globalization we can eliminate poverty and bring economic equality in our country, but it's not happened. The rich have become more rich and the population of the poor is still on a increase. It also leads to insecurity of jobs in our country. So as a result of all this, the government decided to adopt many policies. It's a must to protect the interests not only of the rich and the powerful, but all the people in the country. The government can ensure that labor laws are properly implemented and the workers get their rights. So, through this fair globalization, the government ensures that all the labor laws are properly implemented in our country and the workers get their rights in the proper way. It can also support small producers to improve their performance till the time they become strong enough to compete. So the government also says that they are giving support to the small producers to improve their performance till they become strong to compete with others. If necessary, the government can make use of trade and investment barriers also. So if necessary, that means if necessary to help the small producers, the government once again impose trade barriers in our country. It can negotiate at the WTO for fairer rules. So the government is also of the opinion that they negotiate with this World Trade Organization to make their rules more fairer to our small producers, to help our small producers and workers. It can also align with other developing countries with similar interests to fight against the domination of developed countries in the WTO. So these are the various steps our government decided to adopt to make the globalization fairer. So once again, which are the main steps? The government, they decided to ensure that the laws are properly implemented and workers get their rights. Then the producers, they will help the producers, the government will help the producers till they become strong enough to compete. Then the government can also impose trade barriers on investment and trade. They can negotiate with WTO for fairer rules. They can also align with many other countries, developing countries, with similar interests to fight against the domination of the developed countries in the WTO. Not only the government, the people can also play an important role in the struggle for fair globalization. In the past few years, massive campaigns and representation by people's organization have influenced important decisions relating to trade and investment at the WTO. So just have a quick recall of what we studied in this video. We studied about the factors that enable globalization. The first one is technology, with two examples. One is the improvement in transportation technology with the help of containers, and another one is improvement in information and communication technology. There also we studied one example of this magazine. Then we studied the liberalization policy and what is trade barriers, why our government imposed trade barriers in India and why now our government is having this liberalization policy. Then we studied the World Trade Organization, WTO, its importance, why it is the main objective of these World Trade Organizations, and then we studied the impact of globalization in India. In that impact, we studied both the negative and the positive impacts of globalization, and also we studied about SEZs, special economic zones. Then we studied about the fair globalization, why our government decided to adopt the fair globalization in India. Dear children, watch the video very carefully, copy down all the important points, and read your textbook 3 or 4 times. Okay? Thank you.